Well, hello, my name is Jim Royal. Thank you very much for watching my video. I'm a huge Beatles and Elvis Presley fan and basically classic rock in general. So if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. I'd appreciate that. And at the end, do a thumbs up. That's always a nice thing to do. Today I thought I would do something a little different. My uncle had asked me to do this, Uncle Bruce. He had suggested that I talk about Jeff Lynne of E.L.O. and the connection that Jeff has with the Beatles. So that's what I'm going to do today. Jeff Lynne is the primary songwriter and main force behind E.L.O., otherwise known as Electric Light Orchestra. They were a group that were formed in 1970, and their first run took them through to 1986. This would be a great collection to pick up. Best of Electric Light Orchestra. They have songs such as Evil Woman, Do Ya, Can't Get It Out of My Mind. You might have heard those. Their big one is Mr. Blue Sky. That is one, if you've seen Guardians of the Galaxy, that is on the soundtrack many years later from when it came out originally, but it's on there. I think if there was one song that best epitomizes Jeff Lynne and that E.L.O. sound, it would be that one. So if you've heard that, then you know what I'm talking about. There's just some great stuff on here. Devil Woman's on here, or Evil Woman, I'm sorry. Don't Bring Me Down is another big one. He was also responsible for Xanadu. And then one of my favorites, Rock and Roll is King. So definitely recommend you check that out. The connection, though, with E.L.O. and the Beatles is this specifically. Critics have talked about E.L.O. and they said where the Beatles left off with I Am the Walrus, E.L.O. continued with that sound. Alright, and I mean, they're just amazing. I've always liked E.L.O., I've always liked Jeff Lynne. Jeff Lynne is very modest, like my uncle has said. You know, just a very modest man. He's played with many of the greats. He is a wonderful musician, multi-instrumentalist. He can play, not only can he sing vocals outstandingly and harmony and backing vocals, but he also plays guitar very well. He plays lead, he plays drums, I believe he plays some keyboards, and even just bass. It's just amazing what he can do. And in fact, there's something called, 2012, he came out with an album called Mr. Blue Sky, the very best of E.L.O., and he actually re-recorded the E.L.O. music. And he did most of it by himself on here. So that is that. Now the connection also with the Beatles, besides the influence and sharing some of the same influences like Carl Perkins, like Roy Orbison, is that in 1986 George Harrison was ready to do another solo album. It had been 4 years since Gone Trupo, going on 5 by this point. He'd been disillusioned with the music business. So he had decided to record a new album, and he thought, you know, he looked up Jeff Lynne, went out to dinner together with him just to see if they would click, if they could maybe work together. Turned out that they hit it off right from the beginning. It continued with a lifelong friendship until George's death in 2001, but he did ask him to co-produce the album, which would turn out to be Cloud 9. Not only did they co-produce, but they co-wrote some songs together, like This Is Love, just some great stuff on there. And what I love that Jeff Lynne was able to do was, George Harrison is only one of the 4 of the Beatles, okay? When you had the 4 together, you had the magic. And sure, you still have the magic with them separately, but what I especially like is the fact that he was able to, as co-producer, incorporate a lot of that Beatles sound into Cloud 9. And it became a big monster hit for George. Came his big comeback, and the big song Got My Mind Set on You was also on there. And that was actually a cover tune. At that time also, George wanted to record a B-side for a single for This Is Love from Cloud 9. So he had Jeff Lynne on it. They brought in Roy Orbison, Tom Petty, and Bob Dylan, and they recorded this song Handle with Care, where it was given to Warner Brothers, his label. They listened to it and they said, no way, you cannot waste this as a B-side. And they encouraged them to form a supergroup and record an album. So that's what they did in 1988. All of them were on that. So you had Roy Orbison, you had Bob Dylan, you had the talent of Tom Petty, George Harrison, and Jeff Lynne, and it was just wonderful. And that was a real success too. At that time, Jeff Lynne also started producing for some of these other people in the Beatles circle. For example, Roy Orbison had an album called Mystery Girl. It was finished a month before he passed away at the age of 52. I think he had a heart attack, and that was in late '88. So in '89 this album came out. Jeff Lynne co-produced this one, and actually helped co-write You Got It. George Harrison was also on that song, which was a really phenomenal song. Just really good. And I also love the song A Love So Beautiful, which Jeff Lynne co-wrote with Roy. And it's just a great album. I love it. I bought it at that time. I was just really happy with it. Also, Tom Petty had his first solo album called Full Moon Fever that was released that year in '89. Jeff Lynne co-produced that and also co-wrote a lot of the songs like Free Falling, Running Down a Dream, and of course my favorite, I Won't Back Down. I Won't Back Down also features George Harrison on guitar, and that's great. And if you've seen the video for that, they have Ringo Starr on drums for the video. Really amazing. Really happy with that too. So in 1990 they recorded a second Traveling Wilbury's album. It was called Volume 3. And then in the early mid-90s the Beatles were working on Anthology, and they were originally, what they were given is they were given audio tapes, very crude demos that John Lennon had done, composed in his apartment at the Dakota. I believe most of them were piano demos. And 3 of those songs they actually would later work on. This was from the blessings of Yoko Ono, of course, his widow. She gave the tapes to Paul, and then see what they can do with it. And 2 of those songs appeared on Anthology, Free as a Bird, and also Real Love, which are just amazing. Which Jeff Lynne was able to do, have an old tape that was from the 70s, really crude, and able to incorporate the Beatles on there, the other 3, make it sound like it was all one. Did a phenomenal job with that. In '92, I wanted to mention he also co-produced, or one of the producers for Ringo Starr's comeback album, Time Takes Time, which is really a great album. I suggest you check that out. And then in '97, Paul McCartney released his Flaming Pie, and that album was co-produced by Jeff Lynne. And again, this is my opinion, I think a lot of that Beatle type sound, thanks to Jeff. That's how I feel about that. And then in 2000-2001, E.L.O. Jeff put out an album called Zoom, and again that features both George Harrison and Ringo Starr at different songs on there, a few different songs, and that was pretty cool. And then early 2001, George Harrison wanted to work on a new album. He thought it was time, he was ready. He asked Jeff Lynne to co-produce again. Unfortunately, George got sick. He passed away later that year, but he did want Jeff Lynne to finish with his blessings. He wanted him to finish the project. He had a lot of detailed instructions and notes of how he wanted it done, and he asked that his son Danny Harrison also participate, which is what he did. It's a great album, you know, it's great, and you know, Jeff Lynne did such a great job on it, you can't even tell that it was unfinished. So, you know, Jeff has done so much. He is such a modest fellow. My uncle was also telling me about that, just the influences, and it's really amazing. You enjoy something like the Beatles, and then you have people like Jeff, who also was influenced by the Beatles and continues to take it in a direction farther, and that's what I really love about it. One thing I'm going to recommend to you is Jeff Lynne's E.L.O. Alone in the Universe. This is also what my Uncle Bruce recommended to me. He really liked a couple songs on here a lot. When I Was a Boy is just a real favorite. It talks about Jeff Lynne's past growing up in Birmingham, England, with the Crystal radio set in the 50s. It's just amazing, and again, this is an album where he pretty much plays everything. He has some help with tambourine, and his daughter sings some backing vocals. So I encourage you to check that out. So anyway, that is the connection with Jeff Lynne and the Beatles. very strong connection. He's just very modest. There is a Blue Sky, Mr. Blue Sky DVD that came out a couple years, I think it was around 2012, that shows their interviews, and they show him doing the recording of it, and I would highly encourage you to check it out. He is just a wonderful musician. And I wanted to thank Uncle Bruce right now just for turning me on to different music influences all these years. Not only E.L.O, he recommended Out of the Blue. I believe that was the album that he recommended in Discovery, but definitely Out of the Blue. But also, you know, Chicago with the Horns, the first album from Blood, Sweat, and Tears, which is Child is Father to the Man. Just some great stuff. I mean, we both like Brian Wilson, a little bit of the Beach Boys, and Jeff Lynne co-produced some of that, his first solo album in '88. I mean, it's just amazing. Not only that, Uncle Bruce, I also wanted to thank you, you know, for turning me on to Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. This is something else. The Deja Vu album, he gave that to me one Christmas. They did. Buffalo Springfield, which features Stephen Stills and Neil Young. Just a lot of different things. So wanted to have a nice shout out to you, Uncle. Thank you very much, and thank you all for watching my video. You have a nice day. Bye.